So welcome back. Hope you had a good weekend. We still have lots of stragglers in the morning somehow. I guess the 8 a.m. class is getting to people. So today marks another transition in the class. We're moving from the world of Illustrator into the world of AutoCAD. We are not by any means forgetting Illustrator. We'll take AutoCAD back into Illustrator so you get some techniques on the back side of it. But it's time to break and to start something new. To me, AutoCAD is probably the most valuable application in the architect's toolbox. That being said, it's almost impossible for me to give you enough AutoCAD in 2 or 3 weeks for you to be experts. So how many people feel like they know AutoCAD already really well? Okay, good for you. If you've never touched AutoCAD, that's okay. For those of you that know AutoCAD very well, the stuff that I'm going to go over probably will seem very basic and very quick for the next several days. I do suspect that there will be some stuff that I will teach relating to AutoCAD that you haven't dealt with just yet. It took me a long time to convince the powers that be that AutoCAD was a good idea for this class, and I'm thankful that I finally convinced them because I think it is very valuable for you in going forward. My hope is that you'll have enough now after we go through the AutoCAD section to get by in the world of AutoCAD, but that you'll probably end up needing to take more AutoCAD. That being said, if you end up taking Rhino in the 136 class, you'll pick up enough in Rhino to be fairly proficient in AutoCAD, so the two do work kind of hand in hand. If you've worked at all in Rhino, that'll translate really well into the world of AutoCAD. So today we're going to start with the very, very basics of AutoCAD, and I think it's important to start there to give you a good foundation to work from. So I'm going to go ahead and open up AutoCAD. I believe you guys on your systems have AutoCAD 2016. I only have 2015 on the instructor machine. It makes no difference. They're almost identical. There might be a few little things that are different. And the other problem with AutoCAD is somehow when you first start it, some people get these kinds of startup dialogues, some people don't. Sometimes it looks slightly different because somebody customized it. There's a lot of things in AutoCAD that can look different. But we're going to start with the basics, assuming that you get this kind of startup screen. So in this startup screen, we want to make sure that we're working in feet and inches. I'll show you how to change this after the fact if you make a mistake. But we're going to be working in feet and inches, and we'll go ahead and say OK. And AutoCAD will load up. So a couple things about AutoCAD that are different than what we've seen. Number one, AutoCAD is very much about units and measurements. And so everything that we've worked in, going back to Photoshop, Photoshop was about, oh, let's do a little color here and a little color here, clone stamp, very unprecise. As we worked through and we got into the world of Illustrator, it was still very fluid. We were working in units that had to do with a sheet of paper. When we get into the world of AutoCAD, we're working with actual real-world units. So if we were drawing a building and that building was 24 feet in one direction, we'd draw it as 24 feet in AutoCAD. So everything that you draw in AutoCAD is actually full scale, and everything has a measurement and or an angle assigned to it when we're drawing in the world of AutoCAD. So it's a little bit different to get used to, and because it's a little different, it's a little bit harder, and there's a little bit more to the interface. A couple other things relating to the world of AutoCAD. We draw with white lines on a black background. And this is something that has been the case for AutoCAD for a very, very long time. And the reason that it's set up this way is because when you're drawing in AutoCAD, you tend to spend long periods of time drawing in AutoCAD. And if you draw with a white background with black lines, it's much harder on your eyes than a black background with white lines. So this is designed so that you can stare at the screen for very long periods of time, which in one sense might be sad, and in another sense it's really nice that they did that for us. So when you go to print in AutoCAD, ultimately white lines will turn black. So it's okay that you're in black and white. It won't end up printing that way. It's just a way for us to see things a little bit easier. So as we look at AutoCAD, it's changed a lot since about 2010 in its general look. But we're going to be working in this workspace. Up here at the very top, we have some basic functions like new file, open file, save file, print file. Printing is called plotting in AutoCAD because we plot to plotters, which are the big printers. So it's essentially the same thing. You can print to a small, or you can plot to a small printer too. But anyway, just food for thought. Next to that, we also have the workspaces. So this is essentially like the Adobe suite where we can choose from typography or essentials or photography or whatever in the various applications. This is drafting and annotation mode, which is essentially what we're going to be working in. There are 3D modes if you were working in a specific 3D mode. And if you had a customized workspace and you wanted to save it, you could do that as well. I work with the generic default drafting and annotation mode, and I do that because it should be available on everybody's computer, and it should look the same on everybody's computer. So we're going to have our fingers crossed that it will be the same. Below that, we have our standard file edit menus. Most everything that you need in AutoCAD is hidden somewhere in these menus if you wanted to find it. It can take a while to actually find where those are. So for example, if we went to the Draw menu, we could find the Polyline tool. Unfortunately, because that takes a little bit longer to find, it's less commonly used. But they are there if you wanted them for some reason. Below that, we have a drawing ribbon that's available. The Home tab is usually selected as the default. And what the Home tab does is it breaks apart the various things that we might be doing. We have drawing here first. Then we have modifications second. We have annotations, which are dimensions and leaders and stuff like that. We won't talk at all about that in this class because it's beyond the scope of what I can teach you in such a short amount of time. But it is there as annotations. Then we move on to layers and layer structures, blocks, which again we won't get to, properties. So these are line weights and colors of various lines, etc. We will talk a little bit about that. Groups, measurements, clipboard, and views. So most of what we're going to do is going to center around the drawing and modification tabs right here. Generally, if you leave the Home ribbon up, you'll have access to the most commonly used tools. There's a reason they set it up as the Home ribbon. You probably won't need to go anywhere else. I do want to point out that there are other tabs that are available to you. So the Insert has an expanded set of blocks and references. Annotation has an expanded set of annotations that you can use. And we can go through the rest of these. For the most part, we're going to stick with the Home tab because that's going to cover the bulk of what we need. Our drawing workspace is the black area right here, which you're probably seeing already to begin with. But I want to point out one other thing as we move down the page. And that is this little bar that runs across at the bottom of the page. It may be floating like it is in mine. It may be stuck down at the bottom like it is in some of yours. It may also be running across the entire bottom. Any of those options is fine. Because it seems to match up with most of you, I'm going to leave it set like that. This thing down here at the bottom is called your command line. And so when you're working in a program like AutoCAD or you're working in a program like Rhino, all of the commands that we use, if let's say we wanted to create a polyline, can be accessed via the command line, can be accessed via typing. So instead of having to, let's say we wanted to draw with a polyline, instead of having to actually click on the polyline tool and then start drawing, we could start typing polyline or p-line and in the command line here, and that would show up from our list of what we wanted to do. So as you get faster at AutoCAD and more proficient, you'll use the command line more. And so the fastest people, the fastest workers in AutoCAD use almost entirely the command line rather than picking any buttons. So it has to do with speed more than access to various tools. And so the more comfortable you be, the more you'll end up using this command line. At the very bottom, we have our Model Space tab and our Layout tabs. We'll talk about what layouts and paper space are in a couple, I think it's next week. Over here, we have a bunch of various information that has to do with toggling certain settings on or off. Before we start today, I'm going to have you turn something called Dynamic Input off because it will help us explain how AutoCAD is set up mathematically. And it's a button, and there's, let's see if I can draw it up here so you can see it, because of course it's at the very bottom here. The Dynamic Input button is, it's like a crosshair. This is an awful pen. It's a crosshair with a little box below it. Looks something like that. If you don't see dynamic input on your list, you may have to click on the 3 little lines in the far right corner. And when you do that, dynamic input, you can check the box to turn it on. It actually to show it, which mine is showing. And I want to make sure that instead of it highlighted in blue, it's left white, which means it's off. Okay? This is not something that you'll end up off all the time, but it really, really helps in explaining kind of the general drawing that's set up in AutoCAD. So does everybody have that off for right now? You were able to find it? Turn it off. Turn it off. Okay? So we're going to start in part 1. Today's handout is extraordinarily scripted in the beginning, so you can follow along with me, but if you get lost, you can follow the steps. We're going to start drawing with the Polyline tool, which is available right here. And notice that if I hover over it, it can give me a little bit of extra information about it, and it'll talk about how the shapes work, etc. For right now, I just have clicked the Polyline tool. I can see in my command line that it says P-line specify start point. That's where I'm going to start. And I'm actually going to type in a value on my keyboard. And the point here is that AutoCAD is designed based on a mathematical system. Do you guys remember back when you were in like basic math class, like in algebra or whatever, you had to graph functions and stuff? You guys kind of remember that vaguely? So AutoCAD is set up. God, these are just awful. Maybe I can draw over here. That side is just so terrible. Oh. Hold on, let's see if I can find something better. All right, let's try this one. Well, that one's real good. We'll get there. Maybe one of these will work. There we go. So if you remember back to those math classes, we had a coordinate system that was established. This was the x-axis, this was the y-axis, and we'd do some kind of like a calculation, and we'd chart out points, and we'd count 1, 2, 3, and then we'd go up 1, 2, 3, and then we'd end up with a point at 3, 3. You guys kind of remember that vaguely? Okay. AutoCAD works the same way in that it has a coordinate system that underlies everything that we draw in x and y. And so when I'm typing in a coordinate, right, I can actually specify, say I wanted to start a line at point 0, 0, which would be right there at the origin. I can type in 0, 0, and I can end up with a point that starts at the origin. I could then type in a point up here, say right here, that was 0, 24 feet, and I get a point that was way up here on the y-axis. Okay, so I'm using this coordinate system to be able to specify values or where I want the points to be. Okay, so if I start at point 0, 0, I'm going to go ahead and type in 0, 0, and that's going to specify a start point at the origin. And we can see the origin, I'm just zooming in and zooming out, as the cross between the x and the y. And you can kind of see that right there in this little icon. Okay? The next point that I'm going to type in is I want a line that's 24 feet long that's along the y-axis, that's going straight up. So I would type in 0, 24, and I want to put the little apostrophe after 24 because that's going to indicate that it's 24 feet, not in inches. The quotation mark is inches. The apostrophe is feet. And it didn't, hold on. I failed to put my units correct. So I'm going to type in units. And my length is still in decimal, and yours might be too. I thought I specified that before. If you type units, it'll bring up the drawing units. And I want to switch to architectural. And I'll say OK. If yours needs to do that, you would have to do that as well. 0, 0 is my first point, and 0, 24 feet would be my second point. And it's not going to let me. I'm going to hit enter one more time, and then I'm going to zoom out. and for whatever reason it's not letting me zoom out. So I'll type Z for zoom and then E for extents, which will zoom me out so that I can see the whole length of the line. I apologize for that. Okay, so I have that line that I've drawn. I can draw that again just for practice here. So I'll once again start at point 0, 0, and then enter. And I'm going to draw a line that's straight up at 0, 24 feet. And there it is. Okay. I'll continue on with my next coordinate, and I'm going to type in a value at 12 feet, 24 feet, because I want a line that goes 12 feet over from here. So it would be over 12 and up 24 would be my next point. So I type 12 feet, 24 feet, and that specifies that next point in the coordinate system. Does that kind of make sense for how I'm going about this? Now, sometimes it's difficult to calculate in your head where these points would be. Okay, so I'm using what are called absolute coordinates right now. If you just take x and y, I'm typing in values of where they'd be on the graph. Sometimes you just know where the point should be relative to the last point you clicked. And so I'll use relative coordinates instead. And what relative coordinates do is they replace the origin with the last point that you clicked. So it's going to be that point. So if I wanted to go down 6 feet, I would say at 0, negative 6 feet. Now notice I put the at sign in front, the email at sign. That's telling the computer that I want it to be relative to the last point that I clicked. So I type in at 0, negative 6 feet because I'm going down in the y direction, negative 6 feet. So I'll go ahead and hit enter, and that'll create that point. If I wanted to go from this point over 12 feet, I would say at 12 feet in the x direction, 0 in the y direction, and I'd hit enter. And that creates that piece. So I can continue working my way back. So I could say at 0, negative 12 feet. And now it would be going down. I could say at negative 12 feet, 0. And that would create that side. Now I could switch back into absolute coordinates. This would be 12 feet, 0. So I could just type in 12 feet, 0. And that would create that point. And then I can come back and snap to the end. And I'll press enter to finish. And that creates this essential shape. So I'm going to go through it again. Okay. Let me go ahead and delete this. And just for the practice, I'll do it one more time. You obviously don't have to do it more than once. I'll start with 0, 0, which is my start point. We're going to use absolute coordinates first, which would be 0, 24 feet. Absolute coordinates again would be over 12, up 24. So 12 feet, 24 feet. Now I'm going to switch over into relative coordinates so that I'm going down. So I'd say at sign 0, negative 6 feet. I'm going to go over. So again, at sign 12 feet, 0. I want to go down. So this would be at negative, at 0, negative 12 feet. Right? I could switch back to absolute. It would be 12 feet and then 6 feet. So 12 feet, 6 feet. I could go down. This would be 12 feet, 0. And then I can close like that. So that is the coordinate system. And I'd like to point out this coordinate system because I want you to understand what the backbone of this is, what the backbone of AutoCAD is. It's math. The good news is you don't really have to know any math to define these points. If we come back and we turn dynamic input on, right, if I click the box for that, I can do something a little bit different. And that is that I can start with the polyline, and instead of typing in points, I can specify the length, which is a lot of times easier for people to understand. I'm also going to turn on ortho, which is going to restrict my movement to be at 90 degrees. So it's the button right next to dynamic input down here at the bottom. And so when I'm in this mode, you see that I have a text box that appears as I start to draw. So I clicked here as my first point. I have a text box that appears, and I can type in a value of the length of this line. So a lot of times people leave dynamic input on because it's an easier way of interacting. You don't have to keep track of the coordinates in your head. I like to point out the coordinates because sometimes if you were doing an angled line or something, it makes life a little bit easier. But we can work with the dynamic input for the most part. So I'm going to go ahead and type in 24 feet. And then I can just move my cursor in the direction I want to go and type in the next distance. So this would be 12 feet. So I no longer have any positives or negatives. I just say how far I want to go. So 6 feet, 12 feet, 12 feet, 12 feet, 6 feet. And then I can come back to the starting point here. So that's a lot easier as a way of actually drawing. So it's important to recognize that there are different ways of inputting, and I like to point those out. So one more time, I'll start with the Polyline tool, 0, 0, and this time I'm going to use dynamic input, 24 feet, 12 feet, 6 feet, 12 feet, 12 feet, 12 feet, 6 feet, and I'll finish. Like that. So that tends to be a little bit easier. One thing that I will point out relating to this is thus far I've been typing in a distance in that value. Do you see over on the right here? There's also a degree value. So I have a distance and I have a degree. If I wanted to draw a line that was at, say, 45 degrees instead, I could press the Tab key to switch which value. So let me press the Tab key. See how that's highlighted in blue now? I could type in 45 and press the Tab key. And now whatever I draw is going to be at the 45-degree angle, which can make your life a little bit easier too. So I could say, oh, I want it to be at 24 feet. And then if I wanted the next line to be, say, negative 45, I could draw 12 feet. And so I could actually draw this on its side, right, or at 45 degrees by just typing in that value. So this time it would be negative 135. Oops. No. Hold on, I have to think. 45. No. Should be. Hold on. That would be straight down. There we go. Wait, I want to go this way, not negative 45. Sorry, I don't do this very often. That's 180. It's like 2 something. 235. No, 2. Well, anyway, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Chances are I'm not going to draw it that way anyway, right? It would be easier to draw it this way and then rotate it. But the point is that you can specify what angle you want to draw on. Okay? So after I get to this point where I have this basic shape, like that, I'm going to use another tool, but this time I'm going to be in the Modify section here. And in the Modify section, on the bottom right corner, there's a tool called Offset. And what Offset does is it allows me to start with one line and create a second line. And so I can click on the Offset button, or I could type Offset into the command line. That would be an option. And now it's going to ask me to specify the offset distance. And so this distance I want to be 6 inches. So I'm going to type 6 followed by the quotation mark, and I'll press Enter. And now I can choose whether I want this offset to occur on the inside or the outside of the existing line. And so in this case, I want it to be on the inside, so I'm going to specify a point that's on the inside of my line. So I'll specify a point there, and I've now created a set of walls that go around this basic floor plan. Ultimately, what we're drawing is on the back, so you can kind of see it's a very, very basic floor plan, but it'll get you, looks familiar from those of you that have taken 136, right? But it'll get you kind of started with this process. Okay? So once again, if I wanted to do the offset, I could start by clicking on offset, or I could type offset and press enter. And then it's going to say specify offset distance. It does remember the last distance that I ever offset. So I just offset 6 inches, so it remembers the 6 inches if I were to do it again. But I can type 6 inches again. And I'll press enter. And it's going to ask me, in this case, because I didn't have the object already selected, to select the object. That would be the object. And I want it to go to the inside. So AutoCAD is very, very good at prompting you for the next step. And so if you look next to you, assuming you have dynamic input on, if you look next to your cursor, it's going to tell you what's next. This is what it's asking for. So it's asking for the point on the side to offset. And I'll go ahead and click on that side. Okay, you look at the cursor, it says select objects to offset. That would mean that I could select an object, another object, and I could offset again. And so you can see I could keep going many, many times if I wanted to. Okay? When I'm done, I'll press enter on the keyboard, and I'm going to get rid of a few of these extras, like that. So now I'm back to just this basic little floor plan, this basic set of walls. And now I want to start adding some doors and some windows to this particular floor plan. And so, like I said, it's on the back, and I have some dimensions on the back. I'm not going to have you do the actual dimensions, so you don't have to worry about the dimensions. We're just drawing the drawing. Okay? So I want to add the door that occurs right here in the center of this wall. So when I go to draw, I can again select the polyline, and I'd like it to jump right to the center so that I don't have to try to measure it. And what AutoCAD does is it uses something called snaps that will allow you to click on exactly a particular point. And so right here, I have something called snap. And this, if I click on the little triangle next to it, will show me the various snaps that are currently on. And my guess is that your snaps are already on, and they probably already include endpoint and midpoint snaps. Those are on by default. Assuming that they are on and that this snap icon is blue, when we move to the center of these lines, you see I get that little green triangle. That green triangle represents the midpoint of that line. So if I were to draw a line from this midpoint to that midpoint, right, and press enter, I'd end up with a line that is directly in the middle of that. So let's say, for example, that I didn't have my snap on. Okay? When I went to try to draw a line, I wouldn't know where the midpoint of that line is. I could measure it, okay? But let's just say that I know it's approximately right here. And so I say, okay, well, I'm really good, and I'm gonna start my line right. I'm gonna wait until my cursor's lined up, and there. Okay, that's right on the point. No problem. I'll just draw my line. Okay, and I'll get really close to the line right there. All right, and I'll draw my line, and I'll finish. Okay, but let me start to zoom in. Okay, and the tighter that I zoom in, oh, wait a minute, there's my line, okay, that I drew, but it's not really, even though I thought I was right on top of the line, it's nowhere close to being actually right on top of the line. You guys see that? So it's actually way away from the line itself. If I looked in here, right, oh, wait a minute, my line's much longer than the midpoint. So the snaps are an essential part of the accuracy of AutoCAD. So we need to make sure that we're using those when we start to create our various lines. So once again, I have snaps on, and I'll jump right to the midpoint, and I'll draw from midpoint to create this line. Now I'm going to come back and use the offset tool, just as I did before. So I'll click on offset, and this time I want to go, it's a 3-foot door. So I'm going to go 18 inches, or half of 3 feet, 1 foot 6. So in my head, I can do 18 inches. I can do 1 foot 6 inches. Right? Different strategies. I'll do 18 inches. Notice that it says 1 foot 6. So either way that you choose to do it is fine. And I'll offset to one side. Then I'm going to come back, and I'm going to offset to the other side. There it is. And I'll press enter to finish. Okay, so now I have one side of the door here and one side of the door there. I no longer need the point in the center, so I'll get rid of the point that is in the center. And I'll just do that by pressing the delete key. So now that I have these two lines, I need to be able to get rid of this part of the line and this part of the line. So I need to be able to get rid of those two pieces, and I'll do that by using a command called trim. And what trim does is it gets rid of line segments in between two other line segments. So let me go ahead and click on trim. And I'm going to look at my little heads-up display. It's going to say select objects or select all. So I'll just go ahead and select objects. Now I'd like to point something out. If I create a box from the right side of the screen to the left side of the screen, it selects everything that the box touches. Okay? And it's also a green box. If I were to select instead from the left side of the screen to the right side of the screen, see how it's a blue box instead? This blue box is only going to select things that are completely contained within the box. So I've only selected these two lines. The right to the left will select everything that the box touches. So there's two different selection methods depending on what you're trying to select. Okay? For the most part, you're going to click right to left, but sometimes you end up doing left to right. So now I have all of my lines here selected. I'll go ahead and press Enter to finish selecting the objects. And now it's going to say, which parts do I want to get rid of? And so you see when I move my mouse over this little line segment, see I get the little red X? If I were to click on it, that segment would go away. Likewise, if I were to click on this segment, that segment would go away. And when I'm done, I'll press Enter on the keyboard to finish. So now I've cut a hole through where the door is going to be in this particular section. So let me move on, and I'm going to draw the window next, all right, which is over a little bit further here. All right, so I have a 2-foot window that's 1'6" from this corner. So again, I'll start with the polyline. Okay, but in this case, I can't snap to the center because this window isn't in the center of this wall. So I need to determine where the first edge of this window would be. Well, I know it's 18 inches or 1'6" from this point. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set my mouse over this corner point. And when I do that, I haven't clicked, and I then move my mouse, do you see how it leaves a little green plus sign in the corner? This is now, in Rhino it's called smart tracking. I forget what it's called in AutoCAD. But what this is doing is it's creating a point relative to the point with the little green plus sign on it. So I can type in 1'6". And when I do that, the point that I start from now is 1'6" away from that little green plus. And I can then draw my line down, and I'll hit Enter. Now, one of the snaps that I have on, and it should be on by default, is perpendicular, which allows me to create, when I start here and I come down, it'll create a perfectly square line that's there. So I have that first point, and let me do that again for practice here. We'll go to Polyline. I'll move my mouse over that corner. And then when I move away, it creates a plus sign and a dotted line. Okay? As long as I have that, I can then type in a value, 1'6". And that then lets me start drawing from 1'6" away from the corner. Okay? When I come down here, I'm going to use my perpendicular snap. And then I'll press Enter to finish, like that. Okay. Once again, I'll use my offset this time. I know that this window is 2 inches, so I'll go to Offset, or excuse me, 2 feet, and I'll type 2 feet from here to there, and I've now created this window. Now, in convention, plans with doors, right, have no wall below them, so we don't see any walls, so we trim out for a door. In the interest of a window, we do see there's a wall below the window after we cut through it, so we end up with just 2 lines representing the window, like this. So I'll go ahead and press Enter to finish, and I'd like to designate that this is actually a window, so I'll draw a line that goes across the center from midpoint to midpoint there of this particular window. So now I have one window here, But if we look at the plan, right, I have another window on this side. So I could draw this window the same way. I could come with the Polyline tool. I could set my point, come over 1'6", draw this piece, then offset 2 feet, like that, and then I could draw the center. Okay, so that's one way of doing it, certainly. The easier way of doing it, right, because this is symmetrical, would be to select this and use a mirror command to have it appear on this side. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the whole window. And remember, this is an opportunity for using a box that goes from the left to the right. This is going to contain everything completely within my selection, or my box, but not things that the box touches. So in that case, I'm selecting just the window. If I went from the right to the left, you see how I get the walls too? So learning the difference between a box from the left and a box from the right is going to make a big difference long term. So I've gone ahead and I've selected those pieces, and I'm going to come here to the mirror tool. And again, I could type mirror if I wanted to. And my cursor is saying specify the first point of the mirror line. And so the mirror line would be somewhere right in the middle of this. But notice that I can't really specify where that middle is. What I can do is I can come down to the bottom and snap to the midpoint. That would still be the middle. And you can see that as I draw this little dotted, and on my computer it's yellow, for you guys it's just white. As I draw that mirror line up, we can see that that would fall exactly halfway between that door. And I can also see a preview of what the window is going to look like. So I'll go ahead and click. And it's going to ask me one last question, and that is, do I want to erase the original or the source objects? In this case, no, I don't. And N is the default. So I'll go ahead and hit Enter. And now I have a window and a window. Okay? So mirror can be our best friend, right? I have another 2-foot window that's going to go down here at the bottom. So let me go ahead and take this one. And once again, I'll use mirror. But this time, the mirror line is going to be halfway along this side, right there. And I'll click. Do I want to erase the source objects? No. And now I end up with a window that's at the bottom. Okay, there is a second window that's at the bottom that's right next to the first window, but they're separated by 6 inches. So in this case, I'd like to copy and paste this particular window. So what I'll do is I'll click on the copy command here. And it's going to say select objects. So my objects are the window. And again, selection from left to right to create the window. I'll go ahead and hit Enter to finish selecting the object. Now it's going to say specify base point. This is the point I want to copy from. So I could, for example, click anywhere on the page. And this is going to create a copy. Unfortunately, I don't necessarily know where 6 inches is going to be. Now, I know that the window is 2 feet, so I could say 2'6" and type it in the value. But instead, from a strategy standpoint, it would be better to copy. There's my objects, Enter. And I'll move my mouse right over this corner and then drag going back this direction. Like that. And I can type in then 6 inches. And it will copy from 6 inches away from that particular point. Nope, it didn't do a very good job. Try that one more time. Keep snapping to other points. That's the problem. Let me try it from here. Oh, come on. No. All right, never mind. Scratch that. All right, let me go ahead and just copy it, and I'll do the measurement in my head. It was 2 feet plus 6 inches, so we'll copy from right here. And it would be 2 feet, 6 inches, and that would create that piece, like that. So I have one other window that's on the side, right over here. Now, I could draw it, just like we've been drawing. But there is one quicker way of doing it. And one of the things that you'll find in the world of AutoCAD, it's the same as the world of Rhino, is that there are a lot of ways to do the same thing. And so, yes, I could draw it. I could copy it and then rotate it. But I can also use a mirror command. But instead of mirroring like I've been doing in the center of a wall, I can mirror across a 45-degree line. So I'm going to use mirror, and I'm going to specify this corner, and then I'll specify that corner. And no, I don't want to delete the source objects, and it'll show up there. So I've mirrored across a line that, hold on a second, I'll show you the line. That is essentially that 45-degree line. So instead of mirroring straight from one to the other, I mirrored across those corners to create this window. So in terms of number of clicks or number of steps, that is much, much shorter to get across. Yeah? Just click on one corner and then the other corner. Since they're 6 inches in both directions, you know that it's 45, like that. All right? So that gets you a line that goes, or a window off of that line. So I've got a few more things. I've got a couple more windows to do in these walls. I also have a wall that goes across right here, from there to there, and another wall that goes from here to there. I need to do some trimming to clean those up. So once again, I'll go to Trim, and I'll select from right to left this time to select everything. I'll press Enter, and then we'll get rid of those little line segments like that. I'll press Enter. And then I need to cut in for some doors. So same thing that we did for here, I'll cut in a few more doors. So in the interest of you guys practicing, I'm going to have you guys work to do the rest of this shape, including the doors and the windows. There is some extra detail that I've added on this sheet, like there's double lines for the glass, and there's little window sills and whatever. You don't have to draw any of that. It's just we're trying to get to the basic floor plan. If you feel real comfortable in AutoCAD and you want to do a little bit more or embellish this at all, that's fine. But this is very much for people that have never even opened AutoCAD, trying to learn just the very basics. Okay? Are there any questions? I know that there will be individual questions, so I will float around and help you do it.